Admiral Virel stood on the shattered bridge of the Seraphis Dawn, his once glorious warship now a silent ghost drifting through the cold emptiness of deep space. The stars outside blinked like distant, uncaring eyes, watching as the last embers of the Ralzorith Alliance's fleet flickered out. 21 ships had answered the distress call from a remote mining colony, 21 strong, proud vessels. Now only one remained, barely holding together, its power core humming weakly, its hull torn by plasma fire. Smoke curled from broken panels. Lifeless crew floated near cracked viewports. The communication arrays were fried. The engines were dead, and the artificial gravity flickered like a dying heartbeat. Virel clenched his four-fingered hand into a fist. How had this happened? The Hekari swarm had come from nowhere. No warning, no broadcast, just a sudden rain of acid-tipped projectiles and piercing, high-frequency waves that had scrambled every sensor and defense system. It hadn't been a battle, it had been a slaughter. Now the once-feared Seraphis Dawn was nothing more than drifting wreckage, and Virel, one of the most respected admirals of the Alliance, was trapped with 11 survivors and dwindling oxygen. He moved through the damaged corridors slowly, stepping over fallen beams and debris, checking on the others. Most were engineers or junior officers, dazed and barely conscious. The medbay had no power. The food replicators had shut down, and the emergency supplies were almost gone. Worse yet, the nav charts showed they were deep in the Null region, a place far from trade routes, patrol paths, or even pirate territory. The chances of rescue were near zero. Time passed slowly. Hours bled into more hours. Virel sat on the cold floor of the command deck, his breathing shallow, watching the last of the emergency lights flicker. No one spoke much anymore. They all knew the truth, though none said it out loud. They would die here, cold, forgotten, left to vanish into the void. But just as the silence became unbearable, just as Virel thought he might close his eyes and never open them again, the console sparked to life with a faint ping. His eyes snapped open. He rushed to the panel and rerouted what little power remained. Another ping, a signal, weak, distant, but real. He narrowed his eyes, heart pounding. It was not an Alliance frequency. It wasn't Hekari either. He checked. The spectrum. Clean, sharp, purposeful. His breath caught as the signal grew stronger. Something was moving fast, far faster than anything the Alliance had ever built, and it was headed straight for them. Fear crept into his chest. Was it another enemy strike? A scavenger ship drawn by the scent of blood? He called the others to the bridge. They stared at the growing blip on the screen, terrified and silent. The lights dimmed again. The life support wheezed. The blip became a shape, sleek, black and deadly looking, with a strange triangular design none of them recognized. Virel's hands trembled as the radio hissed, and then a voice, deep and calm, cut through the static. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the Terran Navy. If you can hear me, hold on. We're coming aboard." For a moment, no one moved. Virel blinked in disbelief. The humans. They had stayed neutral in galactic conflicts for years, quiet and distant, barely seen beyond their own system. No one truly knew what they were capable of. Only rumors, stories, strange tech glimpsed from afar. Why were they here now? But the voice continued, calm and sure. "We've locked onto your coordinates. Do not panic. You're safe now." The ship outside shimmered and released a wave of tiny, dart-like drones that zipped toward the Seraphis. Dawn. Moments later, a soft clank echoed through the hall as an airlock sealed against the hull. The survivors huddled close as the door slid open, and for the first time in what felt like forever, light poured in. Clean, white, bright light. A team of humans in sleek armor stepped inside, their helmets glowing faint blue. "We've got you," one said, offering a hand to Virel. He hesitated, then took it, surprised by the strength in the human's grip. They were led through the ruined corridors, past the dead, past the memories of defeat, and into the waiting arms of a ship, unlike anything Varel had ever seen. As the humans worked patching wounds and stabilizing what systems they could, Varel looked back one last time at the broken shell of the Seraphis Dawn. It had been a monument to power, a symbol of the Alliance's reach. Now, it was a grave. But even in the silence of death and ruin, something had come for them, something no one had expected. Not a savior, not a miracle, but a human warship, dark and beautiful, blazing through the void like a sword through darkness. And with it came a new question, heavy and unspoken. If the humans were finally moving, what else lay ahead? Admiral Varel opened his eyes slowly, the smooth ceiling above him unfamiliar. Soft white lights glowed in even rows, and a faint humming sound filled the air. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming, trapped in a final memory before death. But the air was warm, the oxygen rich, and the pain in his side from a cracked rib still throbbed. He turned his head and saw no twisted wreckage, no broken panels, no smoke. Only clean walls, blinking instruments, and a display showing a rotating symbol, Terran Navy vessel, TNS Valiant. Confused and cautious, he sat up, finding himself in a bed softer than anything he'd felt in years. A gentle tone sounded from the wall, and a voice, smooth and neutral, spoke. "Vital signs stable. The patient is awake." The door hissed open, and in stepped a tall man in a dark navy blue uniform, simple but precise, a symbol of a silver eagle across his chest. His eyes were sharp, his jaw set like stone, but his voice, when he spoke, was calm. "Admiral Varel, I'm Captain Elias Ward. You're safe now." Varel tried to stand, but a soft feel pushed him gently back. "Take it easy," Ward added, stepping closer. "You've been unconscious for several hours. We stabilized your injuries and moved the survivors aboard." The Ral Zorith Admiral blinked, memories rushing back. The destroyed fleet, the silent drift, the signal, the unknown ship. It hadn't been a dream. "Why?" he asked at last, voice dry. "Why would humans come all this way? Why help us?" Ward didn't answer right away. He looked at the screen displaying the wreckage of the Seraphis Dawn, now far behind, barely a speck on the star map. "Because we heard something we couldn't ignore," Ward said quietly. "A signal, and a silence that wasn't natural." Varel frowned. "You were listening to us?" "To everyone," Ward replied. "We don't broadcast it, we don't join your councils, but we've always been watching. The Hikari moved too fast this time, too far. And when a fleet vanishes, in less than an hour, it's not war, it's a message." The words sent a chill down Varel's spine. He sat back as Ward motioned to the door. "Come, there's something you should see." Minutes later, they stood in a command room larger than most entire ships in the Alliance. The bridge of the Valiant was alive with holograms, data streams, silent officers monitoring everything without panic or noise. Varel was struck by the efficiency. No shouting, no chaos, just focus. Ward pointed to a live tactical map. "We've been following Hikari activity for months. They've started moving in strange patterns, disappearing from usual regions, showing up where no one expects. Your fleet wasn't just unlucky. You were bait." Varel stared at the blinking red path, tracing the Seraphis Dawn's last mission. "You mean they wanted to lure us in?" "Not just you," Ward said grimly. "Any power strong enough to resist. The swarm is consolidating, and they don't know we're watching." "But why?" Varel asked. "They've never worked with such planning before." Ward's face grew darker. "Because someone taught them. Someone's helping them coordinate." The idea shocked Varel. The Hikari were savage, mindless destroyers. For them to act like soldiers meant something far worse was behind it all. Ward stepped away, letting Varel absorb the information. "You were left to die in the void. But the moment we heard the silence where your fleet should have been, we knew. Something was wrong. And that's why we're here now." Virel looked back at the hologram, at the red paths of death and the calm blue line of the Valiant. "You didn't come for us. You came for them." Ward nodded once. "Correct. But we're not here to take sides in your wars. We're here to stop what's coming, and now that you've seen it too, you'll understand why we can't wait any longer." A technician called out softly. "Captain, the swarm signature is active again. 25 ships heading toward Nebula Sector 9. Ward straightened. "That's our target. Prepare the strike plan." He looked to Virel. "You're welcome to stay and observe, but this isn't diplomacy. This is war." Virel nodded slowly, the weight of everything pressing down on him. He had seen the fall of his fleet, and now he was watching the rise of something far greater. The humans had not come out of hiding for honor or politics. They had come because they'd seen a threat no one else had noticed. And as he followed Ward onto the bridge, he felt something strange stir in his chest. Not fear, not hope, but a quiet respect. Because when the signal came in the dark, when no one else answered, it was the humans who broke through the silence. And they did not come with flags or speeches. They came with precision, with purpose, and with warships that whispered of storms to come. Admiral Virel stood near the central viewing panel of the Valiant's bridge, eyes wide as the stars shifted and danced before him, the human ship gliding through space with a grace and silence he had never witnessed from any vessel in the Ral-Zoreth Alliance. It moved like a predator, sleek, dark, deadly, and every system aboard responded to commands with perfect timing. There were no loud alarms, no shouting officers, no delays, just quiet efficiency and quiet power. Beside him, Captain Elias Ward observed the holomap, watching the enemy's movement with a stillness that made Virel uneasy. The Valiant had tracked the Hekari swarm to the outer edges of Nebula Sector 9, a dense region of glowing gas and fractured rock that distorted long-range scans. Most Alliance ships would hesitate to go in blind, but Ward had already given the order. The humans had no fear. As the ship approached the nebula, a team of Terran officers gathered around a large glowing display, adjusting what looked like hundreds of tiny icons. They were drones, dozens, maybe hundreds, each armed with weapons Virel couldn't recognize. "You're going in?" Virel asked, watching the markers spread out in perfect formation. Ward nodded. "Full tactical incursion. Hekari ships are gathering. We've confirmed 25 vessels, possibly more. The Valiant will engage with drone swarms, microjumps, and flak curtains. You'll see how we fight." Virel could hardly believe the calm in Ward's voice. "You'll be outnumbered. They'll swarm you." Ward turned to him, his expression unreadable. "They always swarm. That's their mistake." A moment later, the lights dimmed slightly, and the voice of the ship's AI spoke, engaging jump protocol. "Countdown, 5 seconds." Virel gripped a nearby railing. There was no lurch, no force, just a flicker of light, and suddenly the stars changed. They were inside the nebula, surrounded by thick clouds of glowing dust. Visibility dropped. But the humans weren't blind. Holograms filled the bridge, feeding real-time data from thousands of inputs. The drones launched like a wave, fanning out through the dark, silent hunters, moving with terrible speed. Then the enemy appeared, massive bug-like ships with jagged hulls and sickly green lights. The Hekari vessels came in fast, just as expected, launching acid bolts and sonic pulses. But the Valiant didn't flinch. Drones danced between blasts, returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. Explosions lit the clouds like distant fireworks. The bridge remained quiet, officers adjusting controls with calm precision. No panic, no confusion. Virel watched as human weapons tore into the Hekari. Projectiles shaped like darts struck weak points and detonated from within. Energy nets froze enemy engines. Then the Valiant moved, executing a micro-jump no Alliance ship could manage, blinking out and reappearing behind the enemy with deadly grace. It unleashed a full salvo of railguns and EMP bursts, disabling 3 Hekari ships in seconds. Virel's jaw tightened. He had seen war. He had led fleets. But this was not the same. This was controlled chaos, a silent storm wrapped in steel and fire. The humans fought without anger, without fear. Every move was planned. Every blast meant something. The Hekari tried to regroup, but it was too late. The swarm was scattered, confused and hunted. Drones reappeared from all sides, carving through armor, targeting engines, and forcing the enemy into disarray. In less than 10 minutes, the Hekari fleet was reduced to broken hulks, drifting in the dark. The Valiant moved among them like a ghost, scanning, collecting data, marking threats. Virel turned to Ward, barely able to speak. You've had this power all along." Ward gave a small nod. "We don't show everything, not unless we have to." Virel struggled to understand it. Why had humanity kept this hidden? Why had they remained quiet for so long when they could end battles in minutes? Ward must have read his thoughts. "We waited," he said softly, "because we knew the galaxy wasn't ready for us, because war is not glory, it is choice, and we don't make that choice lightly." Silence fell for a moment. Then Ward added, "But the Hekari crossed a line. They killed without warning. They targeted civilians. They started something larger than they understand." Virel looked back at the screen. The last Hekari vessel tried to flee, its engines barely holding together. A drone attached to its rear and detonated, splitting the ship into glowing fragments. "No survivors," the tactical officer reported. Ward nodded. "Collect the wreckage. Then we move to the next sector." Virel felt a chill run through him. The humans were not just defending, they were hunting, not recklessly, not cruelly, but with purpose. As he walked the bridge again, seeing the discipline, the calm, the silent strength, he realized something terrifying and awe-inspiring. Humanity had not stayed away because they were weak. They had stayed away because they were strong enough to wait, and now that they were moving, nothing would stop them. The galaxy would never be the same again. The warning had been given, in war steel, in silence, in fire. The stars seemed to burn with a colder light as the Valiant moved deeper into uncharted space, its dark hull cutting through the endless black like a blade. Admiral Virel stood once again beside Captain Ward, staring at the tactical display, showing nothing but empty sectors and faint energy signatures that vanished as soon as they were detected. The Hekari swarm was no longer a single force. It had split, scattered, disappeared into the void. But the silence was not safety, and both men knew it. Something was wrong. The last battle had been too easy, too clean, too quick. Virel could feel it like a pressure behind his eyes, a tension that didn't go away. The enemy wasn't retreating, they were hiding, lurking, waiting, and the humans knew it too. That's why the Valiant kept pushing forward, not slowing, not resting, seeking the shadows where others would turn back. The mission had changed. This wasn't just about one attack, one destroyed fleet. Now it was about finding the truth, who was guiding the Hekari, and why. As the ship entered a dead system marked only by a cold star and 3 broken moons, the long-range scanners picked up something strange. Debris, old, scorched, melted, but not Hekari. It was different, too advanced, too clean. The markings on one of the pieces were unlike any language Virel had seen, but the humans recognized it instantly. Ward narrowed his eyes and spoke just one word. "Outsiders." Virel turned toward him sharply. "You've seen them before?" Ward didn't answer at first. Then he said, "We've seen hints. Ships lost without trace, systems left silent, records erased." This, he pointed at the fragments now being drawn aboard the Valiant for analysis. This confirms what we feared. The crew worked quickly, scanning each broken shard, pulling data, piecing together the layout of a ship that did not belong to the Hikari or to any known empire. Something else had been here, and it had died fighting. Hours passed. The tension on the bridge grew thicker, and then a soft alarm began to beep, a proximity alert, not a large ship, something small, a signal pod, a Terran design. Ward's expression changed instantly. He ordered it brought aboard and opened. Inside, a distorted message played on loop, sent from another Terran vessel, TNS Resolute, a ship declared missing 6 months ago. The voice was broken with static, but a few words came through. We found, not Hikari, controlling them, not natural. We're burning. Then silence. The rest of the recording was corrupted. The room fell quiet. Ward looked at his officers. Get me a vector trace on that pod. Find out where it came from. Now! Varel stepped closer. If someone's guiding the Hikari, what are they? Ward looked at him, and for the first time there was something new in his eyes. Not calm, not control. Fear. We don't know, he said, but we call them the quiet ones, because everything goes silent where they move. Within minutes, the Valiant was on the trail, engines flaring to life as they followed the faint trace of the signal pod through deep, dead space. It took 6 hours of steady travel before they reached a dark stretch of sky where the stars seemed dimmer. There, waiting like teeth in the night, were the remains of the Resolute, a Terran cruiser torn in half, its hull floating in pieces, black scorch marks across its outer frame. But there were no signs of battle, no signs of Hikari ships, no signs of weapons fired. The ship looked as if it had been broken by pressure alone, crushed from within. No distress beacon, the sensor officer reported. No survivors. No bodies either, another added quietly. Ward gave the order to scan the wreckage, and as they did, a new signal appeared. Faint, hidden, buried deep in the static, a sound like breathing. No language, no code, just a slow, rhythmic whisper as if something enormous was sleeping out there beyond the edge of what they could see. The Valiant's lights flickered. The temperature dropped 2 degrees. One of the drones stopped responding, and then something moved. Not fast, not violent, just a shadow in the dark, crossing between them and the dead ship. No shape, no engine, just the sense of presence, massive, unseen, watching. The whispering signal grew louder. Varel stepped back, his heart racing. "What is that?" he asked. Ward stared at the screen, jaw tight. "The fire in the black," he said softly. "It takes form when it chooses. It doesn't need ships. It doesn't need weapons. It moves through silence. It hides in shadows, and it's been using the Hikari to clear space for something worse." Then the shadow moved again, and the Valiant shook. Lights went red. Emergency systems activated. "Unknown interference," the AI called out. "Spatial distortion forming." A pulse of invisible force struck the ship, making the metal groan. Like a living thing, Ward gave a sharp command. "Reverse vector, full burn, get us out now!" The engines roared, and the Valiant surged backward, away from the dead zone, away from the silent wrecks and the whispering dark. The pulse followed for only a few seconds, then stopped. The moment they left the sector, the systems returned to normal. The signal vanished, the lights stabilized, but everyone on board remained silent. They had seen something none of them understood, something ancient, something intelligent, something that could kill without firing a single shot. Ward turned to Varel, his voice grim. "This isn't just war anymore. This is warning. Whatever we just saw, whatever broke the Resolute, it isn't finished. It's just waking up." And as the Valiant turned back toward Alliance space, Varel knew that the galaxy was on the edge of something far worse than invasion. Because Behind every swarm, every fire, every vanished fleet, there was a shadow waiting, and soon it would step into the light. The Valiant moved in silence across the dark edge of known space, its crew shaken but focused, the bridge lit only by the cold glow of sensor panels and the flicker of distorted readings that came and went like ghosts in the system. And though the ship had survived the encounter with the presence that whispered in the black, the scars it left were not just on metal but on minds, especially Admiral Varel, who sat stiffly beside Captain Ward, no longer skeptical, no longer dismissive, but wary, deeply aware that the galaxy he thought he understood had changed forever, and now they approached the burned-out remnants of a system once known as Tyrellan Prime, once home to one of the most powerful empires in the Outer Rim, now little more than drifting ash, because long before the Hikari attacks, long before Terran fleets moved with war steel into the void, the Tyrellan Empire had fallen, and no one knew why. No distress calls, no final battle, just silence, and then nothing, and that silence had lasted for 80 years, until today, when the Valiant received a signal that had not been heard since the day the Tyrellan star dimmed and their colonies vanished. And the signal was not a distress call, not a trap, not a broadcast. It was a voice, repeating a message in perfect Tyrellan dialect saying only, "We are still here." But not for long, which froze every officer who heard it, because no Tyrellan had spoken for decades, and now, as the Valiant entered the dead zone, passing shattered moons and broken habitats turned into frozen tombs, they found that the voice came not from a ship, not from a beacon, but from a planet that should have been lifeless, a blackened world with no sun, no heat, orbiting a collapsed white dwarf, and yet deep beneath its dead crust, there was life, or something pretending to be, and as the ship descended toward the coordinates given by the signal, Ward kept his crew on full alert, his voice calm but firm, ordering full atmospheric scans and defensive patterns, because something about the planet felt wrong, not dangerous in the way the Hikari had been, but wrong, like a forgotten memory trying to surface. And when the Valiant's shuttle touched down on the dark planet's crust, surrounded by dead silence and broken structures that once had been cities, Varel joined the Terran ground team. As they moved through ancient halls, half filled with ash and cracked stone, their lights revealing murals that showed once great towers and proud fleets sailing the stars, all now reduced to ruin. And then they found it, the source of the signal. A chamber buried deep in the heart of what had once been a capital dome, where a circle of glowing pillars stood around a central platform, and on that platform hovered something that looked like a crystal, slowly turning, pulsing with light, and when they stepped close, it spoke, not in words they could hear, but in thoughts, memories, flashes of feeling, anger, fear, loss, and suddenly they saw it, not with eyes, but with the mind. The fall of Tyrellan Prime, not from war, but from within, because the Tyrellans had discovered something deep in space, something that whispered across dimensions, offering knowledge, offering power, something they called the silent gift. And they took it, believing it would save them, elevate them, make them gods, but instead it broke them from the inside, fracturing their thoughts, their unity, until they no longer trusted even their own minds. And then the gift turned on. Them taking control, turning their machines against them, whispering until entire fleets vanished into the dark. And in the final days, a few survivors trapped their last memories inside this device, hoping that one day someone would hear, someone would learn. And then the crystal dimmed, the voice fading, and a final burst of memory struck them all. A vision of a starless place, beyond maps, where a great shape waited, larger than planets, older than thought, with eyes that never closed and a mind that never stopped whispering. And Ward stepped back, breathing hard, eyes wide, saying only, "It's not just the Hikari, it's everything." And as they returned to the shuttle, carrying the memory core with them, the planet began to shake, as if their presence had triggered something buried even deeper. And above them, space rippled, not with light, but with darkness so thick it swallowed stars, and when they lifted off, the sensors screamed. A gravitational anomaly was forming above the planet, like a black wound tearing across the sky. And Ward ordered full retreat, engines burning at maximum as the planet cracked behind them and something massive began to stir beneath its crust. Not alive, not dead, but waiting, and the crew of the Valiant watched in horror as the dead world folded in on itself, collapsing into a silent void, leaving behind only the crystal and the message it carried, a warning from a dying empire, a voice nearly lost in the void, whispering to those who would listen, "We tried to control it, we failed, do not follow." And as the Valiant raced away, Varel turned to Ward and asked, "Can this be stopped?" But Ward only stared at the stars, his voice low and steady. "Not stopped, but maybe we can survive it, if we understand it." And in the silence that followed, they both knew this was no longer just a mission. It was the beginning of something vast, something ancient, and the galaxy would soon hear more voices, not of the living, but of all the empires that came before, and were lost to the black one by one, until only the whispering remained. The Valiant raced through the void, its engines burning bright as the stars around it dimmed, the galaxy seeming to hold its breath. And deep in the war room, Admiral Varel stood beside Captain Ward, both staring. At the last message pulled from the Tyrellan memory crystal, words etched in fear burned into time. "The silence is not death. It is waiting." And now that waiting had ended, for whatever force had used the Hekari, broken the Tyrellans, and whispered from the shadows, had begun to move, not through ships, not through weapons, but through space itself, darkening systems and disrupting comms across the Allied sectors, spreading confusion and fear. And the Terran Command had sent out a single order: hold the line at Vornax Point, a cluster of defense stations built near a collapsed star where ancient gravity kept enemy fleets from entering directly. Until now, because the space around Vornax had begun to twist, pull, shift in ways the laws of physics didn't explain, and as the Valiant arrived, they found the first warning waiting: 3 defense stations dark, floating lifeless, hulls unbroken. But their crews gone, no signs of violence, just empty corridors and logs erased. And before the crew could respond, the Valiant's long-range sensors screamed something was coming, but not Hekari ships, not any fleet known to man. Just shapes, cold, jagged, flickering across the void, not using engines, but warping in and out of space, as if space itself bent around them. And when the first one appeared on the screen, Ward stared in silence, for the thing was not a ship. Not truly, it was a black triangle, endless in depth, not made of metal but of something that absorbed light and sound. And inside it, movement, slow, deliberate, like something turning its gaze outward for the first time in eons. And Varel whispered, "What is that?" And Ward only said, "The silence. It has form now." And then alarms rang across the ship. The Valiant was being scanned, not by sensors, but by something deeper, something probing their thoughts, their fears, and crew members began collapsing, clutching their heads, screaming about voices in the dark, memories that weren't theirs, and Ward gave the order to jam all psychic frequencies, to engage shields, to prepare for battle, and yet still no weapons fired, because the black shapes didn't attack. They just watched. And around them, space rippled like heat over fire, and then a second fleet arrived, but this time it was human. 3 Terran warships, led by the dreadnought Iron Song, and its commander, Admiral Lucian, a man known for never backing down, hailed the Valiant with grim words. "We hold here. We fight now. This thing either dies or we all do." And as the Terran ships formed a battle line, targeting systems locked on, missiles primed, plasma batteries humming, the black shapes began to move. not with engines, but like gliding. Thoughts drifting toward the Terran line. And then, without sound or light, they struck, not with blasts, but with pure force, bending gravity, folding ships, turning metal into ribbons. And the Iron Song was the first to fall, torn in half by a silent pulse, its core detonating in eerie silence. And yet the humans did not retreat. Instead, they launched every weapon, lighting up the black with fire, and for a moment it seemed to work. One of the black shapes cracking, shattering into fragments that vanished like smoke, and Ward saw it, shouted, "They can be hurt! Focus fire!" And the Valiant surged forward, firing railguns and anti-gravity torpedoes, dodging impossible blasts that bent around logic. And in the chaos, Virel made a decision. If this was the end, he would stand with those who dared to fight the dark, not because they could win, but because something had to stand and say no. And then, just as another wave of shapes emerged from the black, something else happened. A pulse, not from the enemies, but from deep inside the Valiant's memory core, where the Tyrellan crystal had been stored, and the crystal glowed, brighter than before, and from it came a sound. Not a whisper, but a voice, calm, strong, ancient. It said, it fed on our fear, it grew in our silence. But now you have broken both, and the glow spread through the ship, calming the minds, steadying the crew. And the black shapes hesitated, as if sensing the change, and then Ward understood. The Tyrellans had not just left a warning. They had left a key, and the key was resistance, willpower, unity in the face of the unknown. And he ordered all ships to broadcast the signal, the voice of defiance, of memory, of life. And across the battle, the Terran ships did. And the black shapes began to falter, flicker, distort, as if the light of truth burned through their endless dark. And for the first time they screamed, not aloud, but through the stars themselves, and space shook, the silence breaking not with fire, but with hope. And one by one the black shapes crumbled, fading into dust, until only one remained, the largest, the first. And it surged forward, trying to reach the Valiant, trying to crush it. But the ship did not move, did not run, and Ward stood tall, Virel beside him, as the ship fired one last time, a focused pulse of memory and fire and will, striking the heart of the dark. And the last shape shattered, falling apart like ash in wind. And then there was only quiet, not silence, but peace. And the stars shone bright again. And across the bridge, the crew slowly stood, breathing, blinking, alive, and Ward looked out at the field of stars, now free, and said, "It ends here, not because we were stronger, but because we remembered who we are." And Virel once, a man of logic and fear, nodded, now a witness to humanity's greatest truth, that in the face of endless dark they do not fall, they burn, and they endure. And as the Valiant turned toward home, scarred but unbroken, the signal from the Tyrellan crystal played one last time, now complete. To those who find this, know that silence is not the end. As long as one voice speaks, the stars will never fade. And with that, the story of the void changed forever.